The 1970s were not an era of subtlety. They were an era of presence, a time when some American automobiles looked bigger, more luxurious, and more important than anything else on the road. And that was exactly what their buyers wanted. They wanted to look successful. They wanted to project wealth. And some cars achieved that better than anything else of their generation. Some of the cars you're about to see look so sophisticated that even half a century later, they still have more personality than many modern automobiles. Let's begin. 1971 Buick Riviera. This car didn't look like an ordinary automobile. It looked like a statement of style. And that's exactly why the Buick Riviera holds such a special place among American cars of the 1970s. Because while many manufacturers tried to impress with size or chrome, the Riviera pursued something much more difficult to achieve: elegance. At first glance, it was impossible to mistake it for anything else from its era. The long body, the perfectly balanced proportions, and the famous boat tail rear design gave it a truly unique presence. It didn't look like a muscle car. It didn't look like a traditional luxury sedan. It looked like something far more exclusive, and that was exactly Buick's intention. The Riviera was designed for buyers who wanted to stand out without needing to be flashy, people who valued design as much as comfort, and that philosophy carried over into the interior as well. The seats were spacious and comfortable. The materials conveyed quality. But here's where things become even more interesting, because beneath all that sophistication sat a massive 455 cubic inch V8, producing around 315 horsepower. And that contrast is exactly what defines the Riviera, because it looked like a car designed purely for luxury, yet it had the performance to surprise many sports cars of its era. Today, the finest examples typically range between $40,000 and $100,000. 1976 Cadillac Eldorado. This car didn't just look elegant, it looked luxurious in the absolute sense of the word. And that's exactly what made it one of the most important American symbols of the 1970s. Because while many manufacturers were beginning to reduce the size of their automobiles, Cadillac continued building cars that were enormous, sophisticated, and designed to impress. And the Eldorado represented that philosophy better than almost anything else. At first glance, it projected prestige. The endless hood, the flowing lines, and the majestic proportions made it look like a car reserved for celebrities, business executives, and people accustomed to being the center of attention. And perhaps the most elegant thing about it was that it never seemed to be trying to attract attention. It simply did. But here's where the story becomes even more interesting. Because this model was marketed as the last American luxury convertible to be mass-produced, and although other manufacturers would eventually offer convertibles again, many buyers at the time believed they were purchasing the end of an era that greatly increased its prestige and its appeal. Inside, the luxury was exactly what you would expect from Cadillac: huge seats, high-quality materials, abundant equipment, and a level of comfort that turned every journey into a relaxing experience. Under the hood sat a gigantic 500 cubic inch V8, producing around 190 horsepower. That figure may not sound impressive today, but this car was never designed to be fast. It was designed to float down the road with absolute smoothness. And that was exactly what it did so well. Today, 1976 Cadillac Eldorados typically range between $25,000 and $80,000, while the finest examples continue to be highly sought after by collectors. 1971 Lincoln Continental Mark III. This car didn't need an introduction, because the moment it appeared, everyone knew it was important. And that's one of the reasons why the Lincoln Continental Mark III became one of the most elegant automobiles of the entire decade. Because while some manufacturers tried to impress through sheer size, Lincoln pursued something far more sophisticated: presence. At first glance, the Mark III looked as though it had been designed for executives, business leaders, and people accustomed to success. The massive front grille, the long hood, and the perfectly balanced proportions gave it an almost aristocratic appearance. It didn't look like a muscle car. It didn't look like a sports car. It looked like an automobile built for someone who had already reached the top. And that was exactly what made it so appealing. But where it truly excelled was inside. The seats were enormous and exceptionally comfortable. The materials projected quality from every angle, and the level of refinement directly rivaled some of Cadillac's finest offerings of the era. Every detail was designed to create a relaxed, quiet, and luxurious experience. And here's where an interesting contrast appears. Because beneath all that sophistication sat a massive 460 cubic inch V8 producing around 365 horsepower. Thanks to that, it could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in approximately 7.5 seconds, much quicker than most people would expect from simply looking at it. Today, the finest Lincoln Continental Mark III examples typically range between $30,000 and $90,000, depending on condition and originality. And now, I want to know something. Between the Buick Riviera and the Cadillac Eldorado we just saw, which one would you choose? Or do you prefer the executive sophistication and understated elegance of this Lincoln Continental Mark III? Let me know in the comments. 1971, Oldsmobile Toronado. This car looked like it came from the future, and perhaps that's one of the reasons it still feels so elegant today. Because while many American automobiles of the early 1970s continued relying on traditional formulas, Oldsmobile was doing something different, something bolder, something more innovative, and the Toronado was the perfect example. At first glance, it had extraordinary presence. The long body, the clean lines, and the low profile gave it a far more modern appearance than most of its rivals. It didn't rely on excessive chrome. It didn't need exaggerated styling details. Its elegance came from its proportions. The result was a car that looked unlike anything else on the road, and the interior lived up to that exclusivity. Spacious seats, quality materials, modern instrumentation for the era. Everything conveyed a sense of progressive luxury, almost as if Oldsmobile was showing the world its vision of the future. Under the hood sat a massive 455 cubic inch V8, producing around 350 horsepower. And that contrast is exactly what makes the Toronado so special, because it looked like an elegant luxury car, yet it hid performance that many drivers never expected. Today, the finest 1971 Oldsmobile Toronados typically range between $25,000 and $70,000. And more than 50 years later, it remains one of the most elegant, innovative, and underrated American automobiles of the entire 1970s. 1973 Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham. This car didn't feel like an automobile. It felt like a luxury lounge on wheels, and that was exactly what Cadillac wanted to achieve. Because during the 1970s, the Fleetwood Brougham represented one of the highest levels of prestige an American automobile could offer. It wasn't designed to attract attention through speed. Its mission was something entirely different: to deliver a luxury experience that few automobiles in the world could match. At first glance, its presence was imposing. The enormous body, the elegant chrome grille, and the majestic proportions created an immediate sense of importance. It looked like the car of a business executive, a politician, or someone accustomed to traveling in absolute comfort, and that was precisely its appeal. But where it truly excelled was inside. The seats were enormous and exceptionally soft. There was more than enough room for every passenger, and the materials conveyed a sense of refinement that made the Fleetwood a benchmark of American luxury. Everything was designed to isolate occupants from the outside world. The noise disappeared, and every journey became a relaxing experience. Today, the finest 1973 Cadillac Fleetwood Broughams typically range between $20,000 and $60,000, depending on condition and originality. And more than 50 years later, it remains one of the most elegant, comfortable, and prestigious American automobiles of the entire 1970s. 1970, Chrysler 300. This car looked too elegant to be a muscle car, and too aggressive to be a luxury car. And that's exactly what makes it so fascinating. At first glance, it was impossible to ignore. The exclusive white and gold color combination, the massive dimensions, and the refined body lines gave it a unique presence on American roads. It didn't look like a conventional automobile. It looked like something built to stand out, and that was exactly Chrysler's intention. But here's the interesting part. Unlike many elegant cars of the era, the 300 also possessed a much more performance-oriented personality. Under the massive hood sat a gigantic 440 cubic inch V8, equipped with three two-barrel carburetors, an engine capable of producing around 390 horsepower. Thanks to that, it could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in approximately 6.5 seconds. Performance that very few luxury automobiles could match. And inside, the atmosphere remained pure American luxury. Spacious seats, an excellent level of equipment, and a driving experience designed for covering long distances in complete comfort. It was fast when it wanted to be, but elegant all the time. Today, the finest Chrysler 300 models typically range between $50,000 and $120,000 due to their rarity and desirability among collectors. And now, I want to know something. Out of all the cars we've seen so far, which one best represents American elegance in the 1970s? The sophisticated Lincoln Mark III, the majestic Cadillac Fleetwood, or this exclusive Chrysler 300? Let me know in the comments. 1975, Chrysler New Yorker, Brougham. This car wasn't trying to impress with speed. It was trying to impress with presence. And it succeeded from the very first moment. Because during the 1970s, the New Yorker Brougham represented exactly what many Americans imagined when they thought of a luxury automobile. At first glance, it projected a sense of prestige that was impossible to ignore. The massive chrome grille, the endless hood, and the clean, refined lines gave it an appearance that seemed perfectly suited for the most exclusive avenues in America. This wasn't a car that followed trends. It was a car designed to communicate success. And that philosophy continued inside, because opening the door felt like stepping into a luxury living room. The seats were enormous and deeply cushioned. There was more than enough room for every passenger, and every detail was designed to maximize comfort. The sound insulation was excellent. The suspension absorbed road imperfections with ease, and the driving experience was smooth and relaxed. Exactly what a Chrysler buyer expected from the brand's flagship model. But here's an interesting contrast. Because despite all that elegance and comfort, the New Yorker was still powered by a massive 440 cubic inch V8, an engine producing around 215 horsepower. It may not have been the fastest car on this list, but it didn't need to be. Its mission was different, to make every journey feel shorter, quieter, and more comfortable, and few American automobiles did that better. Today, the finest 1975 Chrysler New Yorker Broughams typically range between $15,000 and $45,000, depending on condition and originality. 1971, Pontiac Grand Ville. This car seemed to belong to a more elegant era, and perhaps that's the best way to describe it, because while many early 1970s American automobiles focused on traditional luxury, the Pontiac Grand Ville added something more. Distinction. From the very first glance, it projected a sense of exclusivity that was difficult to ignore. The enormous body, the flowing lines, and the perfectly balanced proportions gave it a majestic presence. It didn't look like a car designed to attract attention. It looked like a car designed to impress naturally. And that difference mattered, because the Grand Ville was aimed at buyers who wanted comfort, refinement, and prestige without paying the price of some Cadillacs or Lincolns. And Pontiac delivered exactly that. But where it truly excelled was inside. The seats were huge and exceptionally comfortable. There was plenty of room for passengers. And the ride quality was exactly what you would expect from a large American luxury automobile. Every trip felt more relaxed, more refined. And that was precisely what its owners wanted. But here's where another interesting contrast appears. Because beneath all that elegance sat a massive 455 cubic inch V8, producing around 325 horsepower, a very respectable figure for an automobile of this size. Today, the finest Pontiac Grand Ville models typically range between $20,000 and $60,000, depending on version and condition. And more than 50 years later, it remains one of the most elegant and underrated American automobiles of the entire 1970s. 1972, Buick Electra 225 Limited. This car never needed to prove it was luxurious. It was obvious from the very first glance. And that's exactly why the Electra 225 Limited became one of the most elegant American automobiles of the 1970s. because while some manufacturers were trying to impress buyers with increasingly dramatic styling, Buick focused on something more sophisticated: refinement. At first glance, the Electra projected prestige. The massive body, the clean lines, and the elegant front grille gave it a presence that seemed perfectly suited for the most exclusive avenues in America. But where it truly excelled was inside. The Limited represented the very best Buick had to offer. The seats were exceptionally comfortable, the materials were carefully selected, and every detail was designed to create an atmosphere of genuine American luxury. It was the kind of car you wanted to spend hours traveling in, because beneath that enormous hood sat a 455 cubic inch V8, producing around 250 horsepower, more performance than most people would expect from what was essentially a living room on wheels. And that's exactly what makes the Electra so special, because it combines size, elegance, and power without sacrificing comfort. Today, the finest Buick Electra 225 limited models typically range between $20,000 and $70,000 depending on condition and originality. And when you look at all of these automobiles together, it becomes easy to understand why the 1970s were one of the most elegant decades in American automotive history. Because during those years, manufacturers weren't obsessed with lap times or technology. They were obsessed with something different: presence, comfort, and the ability to turn every journey into a special experience. And now, I want to know your opinion. Out of every car we saw today, which one best represents American elegance in the 1970s? The stunning Buick Riviera? The luxurious Cadillac Eldorado Convertible? The refined Lincoln Continental Mark III? Or one of the other automobiles on this list? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey through the most elegant American cars of the 1970s, be sure to watch the video appearing on your screen right now, because we'll travel back one more decade to discover the most elegant American cars of the 1960s. And trust me, some of those automobiles were so sophisticated and beautiful that they helped define American luxury for generations. See you in the next video.